think we get it wrong sometimes how that mentor relationship is supposed to be. You're getting mentored along the way. You just need to find the right people to follow. And you're going to take advantage of those opportunities to do work with them. I think we have this ideal vision that someone is going to seek you out, they're going to put their arm around your shoulder, and they're going to tell you to walk the path with them. That's not where the sweet stuff happens. The sweet stuff happens down in the trenches where you're watching those people do the work and you're finding opportunities to do work with them. Welcome to OpsTalk, Westminster Fire Department's operational training podcast, where we share ideas and knowledge through honest conversations, highlighting the people who do the work. I'm Eric Linnenburger, Deputy Chief of Operations. While built as a resource for our members, we invite the greater fire service and the community to be part of the conversation. What we share reflects our current approach under present conditions. Always follow your department's procedures and guidelines. Welcome to OpsTalk. This is part 2 of our profile of the lieutenant position. In part 1, we covered our guest journey into the role, experiences while doing the job. We went way beyond what's in the job description and shared what it's really like. If you haven't watched yet, I highly recommend going back and watching part 1 first. Today, part 2 has a focus on mentorship and preparation for a fire service leadership position. If you're aspiring for leadership, know someone who is, or just want to up your game, you're really going to enjoy this one. Let's jump back into our conversation with Nolan Bailey, Sam Craen, and Greg Schar. I appreciate you bringing that up about mentors, and I do want to talk about that because I'd like to start to pivot towards officer development preparation. You guys know me well. You know I'm not big on preparing for the test. I want people to prepare for the position, and then when you prepare for the position, you are going to perform on test day, but there's still a certain preparation. We all know it. You have to come in prepared for that. And I think mentors are a major part of that. I think sometimes people get the whole mentor thing wrong. And it's really what got me on this track a few years ago. I wrote an article for fire engineering, and it was all about creating the right mindset for leadership. And it was all the things that you have to do because leadership, especially that company officer role, it's an inside game. You don't get the information spoon-fed to you from other people. I'm sorry, that's just not going to work. It's going to show up in the job, and it's going to show up on test day as well. And I think we get it wrong sometimes how that mentor relationship is supposed to be. And I think what I heard you saying, and it's the way I felt my whole career, is you're getting mentored along the way. You just need to find the right people to follow, right? And you're going to take advantage of those opportunities to do work with them. It's not I think we have this ideal vision that someone is going to seek you out, they're going to put their arm around your shoulder, and they're going to tell you to walk the path with them or something. And that, although that is a form of mentorship and that might happen to a point, that's not where the sweet stuff happens. The sweet stuff happens down in the trenches where you're watching those people do the work and you're finding opportunities to do work with them. For people aspiring for this position, because I know there's going to be some people that might see this episode and just, they want it all for how can I do well on the test? And hopefully they're not coming at it that way, but we need to give some tips and tricks on how you can prepare for the process, but more importantly, prepare for the job. And so I'll also link in the show notes to that article I wrote. It's not all encompassing by any means, but it's kind of the approach I used back in the day to start to get in the right mindset to succeed in these positions. Greg, you are the newest in the role. You just recently went through this process and did a really, really good job. And again, from the context of not necessarily just the process, but preparing for the job, which then will make you succeed in the process. Can you talk about some of your approach?
So my process towards taking the test probably officially started 3 years before I took the test. And a lot of that involved just, understanding who I am, understanding what I bring to the table, what my positives, negatives, my strengths, my weaknesses, like where can I improve? And the reason I started so long before that test was because finding those weaknesses or those areas of improvement, I need to recognize them early and start fixing them, start strengthening those spots and becoming what I want to be. And through that was, looking at the lieutenant job description and figuring out, how do I fit this? Where do I fit? Do I have a good understanding of what this position is beyond just what you'll see on a daily basis? But starting that far back gave me a chance to really kind of get up in the clouds with it and really start thinking about the theory of leadership and the methodologies of it, and like how to start bridging leadership and management, and understanding that you can't motivate everybody, but you have the ability to inspire people. And how do you do that? And how do you do that with other people? And really starting to understand that circle of influence and how big that gets, and the ripple effect that's going to come off of you when you're in that position. I did a lot of personal 360s with people. I think I did one with almost everybody that's on this right now. And just to figure out, what are people saying about me, or what are things that I don't see, and start identifying those blind spots, and like really just know who you are and your reputation, and your influence right now as a person, and like what people see, what people don't, and figuring out how I can prove. I guess what I was trying to do is find a spot where I could prove that I am a lieutenant, and you guys were just holding my badge for me. That was truly what I was trying to do, is like, no, this is who I am. This is what I am. But I just need your permission to fully run with this. So when you like books, like going through the books and the SOGs and all that stuff, yeah, it's a grind. You just got to do it. It's studying. But really, a lot of the work comes in is, do you know and understand your organization's tactics and expectations when you're running a fire scene, when it comes to that ICS scenario that you're going to go through? Do you really know who you are and what your goals are and how they align with the department? And do you understand that position fully when it comes to actually being a lieutenant? That's what's going to get you through the interview portion. So it's it's a big journey of you and the department, and how those two things intertwine, and where that's going to go from there. So it's truly understanding all of that.
I think that there are opportunities around us all the time that people aren't even aware of, and if you are engaged in the process, you'll figure that stuff out, right? You'll see that even if you're riding in the back seat of the engine, or returning from a transport on the medic unit, there are opportunities along the way. I sized up probably, I don't know how many thousands of buildings. Probably my wife got tired of hearing me. We're just driving through random neighborhoods or whatever, and I'm giving size up. Sometimes you're doing it in your head, and a lot of times you just need to do it out loud. But you've got opportunities every building you're in, e- even if it's a medical call. Like, you've got an opportunity to size that up and be thinking about how I'm going to deal with that as a company officer. The time, if you're waiting until you hit the testing scenario, or get that promotion, it's way too late. There's opportunities around us. I think we mentioned a little bit earlier with special teams and committees and different things within the fire department to get involved. Like, get involved. And I
Mhm.
and I think that we see that a lot. It's you'll see these people, all of a sudden they decide that they're going to aspire for a leadership position. We're going to trust them with all these people, but they haven't even proven themselves in other aspects. And so those kind of things just go so far, and it starts like years ago, like you said. I appreciate that, Sam. You're not that far out of the game, and I know you've been really engaged in this process, and you've mentored some people along the way as well. What suggestions do you have for people as they're preparing for the job and for the process?
Um, Greg touched on it, and I can't emphasize the importance of self-introspection and seeing how you're perceived, and understanding how your behaviors in the past might create barriers to you being a successful leader in the future. One of the biggest barriers that I had, I can only speak for myself. I had some things that I needed to overcome prior to promoting. And the biggest one that I had was, and it came up in my Chiefs interview, the Chiefs know. They know you. They know who you are, and that's going to follow you into that interview. So you need to be prepared to answer and speak to some of the things that maybe will create issues for you as a company officer. Mine was my level of intensity, just with my background, pretty intense person, and that's derived from passion for what I'm doing and the people around me. However, for some people, that can be seen, and I found this out just a couple months before the test, that can create a barrier where people maybe don't want to approach me based on that level of intensity, because maybe they don't perceive it as passion. Maybe they just perceive it that maybe um I don't want to use the word, but I will. That was a dick, that maybe I was just coming across that way to certain people. And I don't think they really truly understood the motivation behind it. And what they told me is once they did speak to me, they're like, oh, he's not that way. He's just really, really passionate about what he's doing in his job. And I remember one of the firefighters came up to me. We were at a dive training. And, she told me for the first year, she didn't even want to approach me just because of that passion and the intensity I was putting out. And then one of the most intense people that we have on the department was also at that dive training, looked at me, he's like, yeah, you're pretty intense. And I'm like, I really had to think about that. And I'm like, man, that's going to be an issue for me going forward, because not everybody is going to have that or understand that in the firehouse. And if I'm trying to communicate with them either on a personnel issue or maybe they're struggling or something like that, maybe they won't feel like they can approach me or have a candid conversation because they don't feel like I would be receptive. So the self-introspection part and finding out, getting candid feedback from your mentors, finding somebody that is going to shoot you straight on where you stand and how your behavior might affect you in the future is imperative to you being successful. And you're going to hear some things that are difficult. And it's up to you to take that feedback and change and put those things into action. That's up to you. If you find that mentor that is going to be candid with you and give you that feedback, now you have to decide to commit to it and realize that maybe you're wrong on some things. And that takes a level of humility that isn't comfortable for a lot of people, especially firefighters, to be like, oh, I'm actually bad at this, or this could be a problem. And you have to recognize it and take actions to change, which is what Greg said. Like, it starts years before you show up to that test, because you have to put the effort into changing certain behaviors. And, it's not everybody is going to have the same experiences or be, have a huge thing glaring in their past, but you do need to recognize what you have as a person and then take actions to make sure that those things are corrected. I remember when I was when I was a rifle squad leader, I had this one person, and I spoke about this in my interview. I had this one person who reported to my unit, to my squad, who not what somebody would picture as an infantry soldier. Small in stature, very timid, quiet, shy, reserved, and he was in another squad prior to mine. And in order to build him up, that squad leader gave him the heaviest weapon system, the machine gun, and said, you're going to learn to carry this because it's going to make you better. And over time, as I trained my squad, I noticed that this person didn't respond to the same level of motivation as the rest of the squad. They required more personal time with myself as their squad leader to lay things out and discuss and work through, much more academic than physical, motor. And as we progressed, we went on deployment. We were getting ready to go on deployment. We went to Fort Irwin, California to do our National Training Center. It was basically an evaluation to make sure that we're ready for combat deployment. This individual had a medical emergency while we're doing a movement, and he went down. Turns out he also had asthma. I'm not sure how that, or he had a reactive airway to sage, and he had to get chopper flown out. And we went back to our base a couple weeks later when we were done with our rotation down there. We were basically in a retrofit stage where we had to rehab our gear. And I gave this individual an assignment to go rehab certain elements, certain tools that need to be, maintenanced. And he told me that the night before, he was in his barracks room with a noose preparing to hang himself. And that really caught me off guard. It's obviously something you're not expecting to hear. But he told me that the reason he felt comfortable coming in and talking to me, he didn't tell his family, he didn't tell his brother and sisters, he told his squad leader, was because of the amount of time that I had invested with him. And if I hadn't changed my leadership style to address his needs, maybe he never would have come to me. And so that's why I was bringing up how important it is to have those conversation with mentors who are going to be candid with you and then seek to work on those things when you come in prior to coming in a job interview, because those human skills, they call them, I don't like the soft skills word, the human skills of the job. This job is going to be about people in every aspect of that, of what we do. And you need to have those relationships with people prior to going in. It doesn't mean that you're not going to hold them to a standard, but it's also that you're going to be there to support them when that time comes. Another thing that I would heavily advise against when you go into these interviews is people think that the books that they've read and the outside trainings that they have attended, they rattle those things off in a list and they think those are going to be the things that push them over the finish line. And that cannot be further from the truth. Those things help you. They help you gain experience and perspective outside your fire department, so you don't just have one style of thinking. But what the command staff wants to know in that interview is who you are as a person, what values drive you, what your leadership style is, and then how you're going to use that leadership style and those values to affect the mission, vision, and values in the fire station when your BC is not there and it's just you, and you have to deal with these humans. That is what the chiefs are looking for. Focus on those things. Still bring those other parts up in your interview. Those things all help. But that list of things that you've done should not be your driving focus that you believe is going to put you across the finish line. And that's the biggest mistake I see, is people leaning on that. Well, I've gone to this and I've gone to Florida and I've, read this book. Well, that's great. But who are you? Let that be the thing that pushes you over that line.
I appreciate that level of honesty and those past experiences and your self-reflection as well on those things. And you're right. We are looking for people we can trust to take care of humans, to take care of our most valuable assets we have in our organization. And you are at the tip of the spear when it comes to that. And it's a big decision we have to make. And that's what we're looking for. You couldn't have said it better. I would like to say that, you talked about that self-reflection piece, and there are times we have to change, but it's not like we're not asking you to change who you are, but we're asking you to recognize and adapt. And you talked about the adaptive leadership. And I think that's a key. I think that you'll ask fire service professionals, well, what kind of leader are you? And then they start to give the textbook, well, I'm a servant leader, and I'm half the time they don't even know what that means. Like, yeah, we need to strive to be servant leaders. There's no doubt about it. But I think more importantly, like, we need to know how to be adaptable leaders. And sometimes it's got to be a little bit transformative where we're going to inspire people. But then sometimes we have to, it might be a little transactional where it's like, you're going to be real clear about what you're going to offer them and what you expect out of them. And they're going to give you that. And it's going to be different based on different circumstances. So really appreciate that, Sam. I think that's kind of that next level leader that has the ability to adapt to the scenario they're in and know themselves enough to know how to make that pivot and that adaptation. So appreciate that. Hey, Nolan, how about you? You've seen some leaders come and go. You've also gone through these processes yourself. Like, how did you kind of build yourself up and get yourself ready for leadership? But then how are you helping other people do that now?
Just absorbing what Greg and Sam said, outstanding stuff. And really kind of the biggest thing I had is just expanding on the points that were already hit by these two guys here. Chief, I think you're right. Like, when you put the widest brush possible across the lieutenant position, your job is to take care of human beings, right? And that is the public and your crew as well. A couple of things, again, I'm just taking notes as these two rock stars here were rattling stuff off, because I think they hit all the big things that were going through my head. But those human skills, like Greg said, he prepped for this 3 years before he even took the test. And I had a similar route here, because I think it's very important that you know thyself before you can expect yourself to lead people. How the hell are you going to do that? What's that going to look like? How it looks for Sam, how it looks for Greg, probably quite a bit different in some corners of how we do it. But guess what? We all get the job done. How we get there might look a little bit different, but we're all human beings, right? We're all going to respond to things and communicate things a little bit different. So, I haven't heard it too frequent lately, but I have had a couple of our members come up and go, hey man, like, I'm going to put in my application for lieutenant. What do I need to get ready for? And I'm looking going, that test is in 2 months. You know what I mean? And so it's getting ready for that is a year-round job within the job. Chief, you talked about how there's opportunity everywhere. Like if there's things that from the human factor that you need to change, and that test is 2 months away, you're probably too late. It's time to start thinking about and getting those 360 assessments, knowing what your personality and your leadership and communication style is, and be working on those things well before any process ever happens. We've all heard that testing season, and I'm sure that some of us have even seen that where it's like, oh yeah, the lieutenant application is coming out. I'm going to put my lieutenant behavior on, my lieutenant behavior hat on. That's not how it works. It's not teeing yourself up for success. It's really breaking down who you are, how's this going to look when you do it. And a lot of times that just takes reps in that seat, even as an acting officer. I know the first time that I tested, I had maybe a month in the front seat, and I felt like I was ready. I'd studied the stuff. I had great input from my mentors at the time. Man, I'm going to rock this thing. And of course you're disappointed when you don't get the job, but taking that constructive feedback of how things went, that is gold. Like when you have that post-assessment follow-up with the assessors, when they talk about like your opportunities and challenges, let's just call them what they are, strengths and weaknesses, that should be the front cover page of your study material for the next time, because the group that just evaluated you is literally telling you what you need to do to do better and win the job the next time. So I would say my advice is really avoid that testing season. Testing season's a year-round. It's a year-round job. When you get the lieutenant job, obviously, it's a year-round job. You don't get to decide when you're going to do it and then have like a light switch and turn it off. Greg really hit on something as far as the testing material. The reading list is going to come out. The books are there. The SOGs are there. The expectations are stuff you need to know. It's one thing to read a bunch of words and go, oh, that could be a test question. It's another thing to read that information and go, how do I plug this into being in that lieutenant position? Absorbing that material is everything. Past strategies that probably haven't worked well for some is like they go all in, they put all their eggs in the written test basket. Well, there's not enough rebound time to get yourself ready for an oral board, to get yourself ready for ICS. There's a strategy to well-rounding yourself, because you don't have time, if you're taking that promotional test, to go all in on just one piece of it and then try to get ready for the next thing. It does not work. I recently did this with a crew member of mine that's taken the lieutenant test, and helped that individual kind of build out a strategy. You look at this mountain of material, because let's face it, we all know that like it's a huge mountain of stuff that you need to study, and it's like, how the hell do I get well-rounded in this? And on the study material isn't even an ICS prep, so there's that piece of it too, which is the most important, obviously, but I mean on the daily basis. But how do you break that down? And a strategy that worked well for me is the reading list has changed a little bit since I took the test, but I took the fireground stuff and did that while I was on duty. Everything that was policy, SOGs, city policy and rules, things like that was off-duty studying. So I was very disciplined in, like, depending on where I was at, what stuff I was studying, and that worked well for me. Maybe it doesn't work well for everybody, but the point is you gotta have a strategy to prepare yourself so that you're well-rounded. Because really that written test is a ticket to the game. You pass that test, it's a ticket to the show, and the show is all of the things that you're going to be expected to be competent in as a company officer. So really, not just studying the stuff, but putting your head in the game as far as how that looks. When you show up for the big test day and you have oral board questions and ICS, and this might date my time since I last took a lieutenant test, but the in-basket exercise that has probably changed a ton of times since then. Come in with your uniform on, with your head in the game, and when you're driving into that process, you're driving into the firehouse. You're not driving into an assessment center. Handle that how you're going to handle it as a lieutenant. So I guess that's just a bunch of advice for those that are testing. I remember my mentor telling me, like, and we've all heard it, don't study for the test, study for the job. And I didn't fully understand that until the first time I took the test. And after I drove away, I went, cool, I know exactly what that looks like now, And then the second and third subsequent times when I got promoted on the third time, like, I knew what that looked like. I'm preparing for this job. The information is just how to do the job. It's not a checkbox. There's no check boxes. And that's the hard part, is like all the prep stuff. Even when you study for ICS or you go through, Blue Card Command, it's a big page of check boxes. Okay, cool. Well, that's not the full part of that. You're doing the job. You're not checking the boxes. So that made so much more sense after I went through it the first time. And just another note that I wrote here, we've all heard this before, don't shy away from skills that you need to improve on. That's not just hard skills, forcible entry, throwing ladders, things like that. Anybody that's testing or preparing to test for that lieutenant job, if you know that your interview game is weak, spend the time on it. Don't shy away from it because you know that that's not something that you're good at, because it's going to happen. It's just like the fire ground. If you know that you're not good at throwing ladders, there's a good chance that next fire that you go to, that's going to be what's needed. You know what I mean? So, when you boil all this stuff down and you hear these things that sound cliche, they cover every angle of this job, whether it's fire ground, in the firehouse, promotional processes. If you shy away from those things you're weak at, that's what you're going to get dealt. That's the hand you're going to get dealt. So just, be willing to have that humility and, strengthen those areas that are weak. And a lot of times that takes, like Greg said, doing those 360 assessments. He and I did those together, and hearing another person's perspective, because how you think you see and sound isn't exactly how you see and sound to a group, So just be willing to put in that work and make it a year-round event. Like, this shouldn't be the application opened and now I'm going to change who I am. It doesn't work well.
Very well said. Greg, you have something there?
Yeah. Nolan was talking about kind of that. He touched on mindset. He touched on how you're not driving into an assessment center, you're driving into the firehouse. And what's kind of funny about that is the day that I did my ICS scenario, it was at like 2:00 in the afternoon. So kind of instead of going in cold and like immediately walking in the door and start running a fire, I chose to drive to the firehouse and went through my normal day. I went through a rig check. I chatted with the crew, kind of did all that stuff, just within the back of my mind, knowing I was going to be running a fire that afternoon, just to get in the right mental headspace to be able to be successful in that environment. Because that was something that I was kind of worried about going into, is flubbing some radio communication or doing something dumb just because I'm going in cold. And I can sit here and size up buildings and think about all that stuff, but there's a certain switch that flips when you walk in the door of a firehouse that really puts you in the right headspace to start doing your job. And knowing that about myself, that was something that was actually really important to me and calmed me down a lot before that test, is just going through it and being like, it's a normal work day. Just treat it like a normal work day. And it speaks greatly to just the mindset of testing. Just when you're going into it, like, don't think about it as being a test. Think about it being the job. So, and whatever you need to do, like me going to the firehouse and doing rig checks and everything else, that might be a bit extreme, but that was what worked for me. But know what works for you. Know how you can get in that right headspace.
Super cool. I'd never thought of something like that, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I think we need to start working on wrapping up, but that brings us to a good point here. You guys are all making some great suggestions here, giving some great advice. I'd like to talk about how advice works sometimes, and sometimes we get really, really good advice, and sometimes we get some poor advice. You guys have some examples just around the horn of some good advice you've received and maybe some bad advice you've received. And we take it all in, right? I mean, it's all research, right? Along the way. And it's just depends on how we apply it.
Chief, I'm very fortunate in my experience with our department, where I've had some of the best company officers and fellow firefighters and paramedics on my crews to help mentor me and build me. They always gave me very, very good advice. So it's hard for me there were so many pieces like we've already talked about, right? Prepare for the position, not the job or the test. Talked about self-introspection. They provided me candid feedback. I didn't shy away from that. And then I chose to do something about it. So I didn't get much bad advice from any of them. You know, they were very helpful in my career, which I attribute greatly to my success in the process and being promoted. Like Nolan said, we do ride on the back of giants. If I could think of something negative that I heard is, and this was when I was testing, and I've heard it a few times, and it always really does not sit well with me when I hear it. And it's not so much advice as it is, I guess, a motivation to take the lieutenant's test. And that is, I'm testing because I don't want to work for that person. And man, I can tell you right now, you are going to fail if that is your motivation to test, because you're testing out of selfish reasons. And that is not going to fly. If that is your only motivator to take the lieutenant's test and promote to that position, first, you're probably not going to do well at the process. And two, if you do manage to make it through the process, you're not going to do well at the position, because your entire intrinsic motivation for being there is for selfish reasons. You need to be legitimate, transparent, and consistent with your crew and be there for the right reasons. It's not about you anymore. It's about being scaffolding for the people around you to build them up and allow them to ride on your back, just like we were so fortunate to have. We've all talked about the mentors we had. Now you are that person. Even if you don't see yourself that way, you can be that person for someone else. And that really is the job. If you're not a legitimate leader, you're going to be motivated by the same selfish reasons that you use to promote to begin with. Like, oh, I don't want to work for that person. Well, that's going to follow you into the job. You know, maybe you're just using it to elevate your position within the department. I guess what I'm trying to say is, be that person that your people need and they expect you to be. And if your motivation for testing is simply not to work for somebody else because you don't like them, that's not going to contribute to your success in overall. It shouldn't be about how many emails you can send out to gain recognition from command staff. It shouldn't be about how many things can I be involved in so I show my value. It needs to be about being there with the crew and working to better them and yourself at the same time. So that's really the only thing that I can think of. That's always just sat really poorly with me when I hear that person say it. And what I can say is, those people who have said it, they're not promoted right now. So command staff knows. When testing season rolls around, you start seeing those emails fly. They know. They know you. We know you. Be legitimate. If you truly want this position, recognize that you are going to have to be sacrificial. Your things come last. I'm usually the last person up at my station. I make a list every day of what my crew needs, what my battalion needs, and then my needs. I'm doing reports at 11 o'clock at night, or any things that I want to work on. That is the job. That is what it's going to be. So do it for the right reasons.
Well said. Thank you. How about you, Greg? Any good advice or bad advice to end on?
Yeah, I mean, probably one of the best pieces of advice that I received along the way was, know the history. So you get excited about things, you want to do stuff, you want to make all these big changes, but you got to know the history of what's going on in our department. You got to know, you know, are those big changes really that new and different, or is it something that we used to do and we went away for it for whatever reason, or is it something that's been attempted and was unsuccessful for reason X, Y, and Z? Beyond that, like, know your history, know what you're about, where you came from, what's led you all the way up to this point. And that affects any position. Like, why are you sitting where you're sitting right now? What brought you here? Why are you here? And knowing that stuff it really can help shape the future. So if you want to make change, you want to do something different, you want to better things, you need to know where we're coming from, you know, as individuals and as a department. But you know, something that's probably the most positive thing, but something that isn't, I won't take it as negative advice, but it's something that I kind of disagree with. And it's and this might be a little blasphemous, but that the book Buddy to Boss these days, the fire service is changing. The way that we interact with people is changing. The way that people develop relationships and trust is changing. That book, the way that I interpreted it, is you are now something different when you're a lieutenant. You are over here and everyone else is over here. And it's just something I don't agree with. Like you're a piece of many. Like you're just a piece in the puzzle, and you have certain responsibilities to create the entire picture, but it doesn't mean that you're separate. It doesn't mean that you're on an island. It doesn't mean that you're by yourself, or I'm command staff, or I'm a lieutenant, or I'm whatever. Like just because you have bugles doesn't make you not a firefighter. You're still part of the crew. You're still an integral part of the crew, and you need to act as such. So it's not nothing that I got from anyone in my department. It's nothing that I got from anyone in our surrounding departments. But things are changing, and it needs to be recognized that the way that we interact with one another changes, and the way that we understand each other changes. And if you put yourself as some other thing that you really aren't, people aren't going to trust you. They're not going to follow you. They're not going to want to listen to you because they think that you're some red hat syndrome lieutenant who is just all high and mighty because they got a little ounce of power. It's just be yourself, keep being the same person, and just know that you're still part of that group. You're part of two groups now. You're part of the officer group, and you're part of all the firefighters. So be that liaison and be that middleman.
Yeah, it's not an easy place to be, but can be so impactful for the people that know how to do it right and to connect all of the dots, right? It's not all about the crew, it's also about your shift, it's about your battalion, it's about the organization. And I agree with you, man. I think some people go all in on some of that kind of stuff, and they're not really understanding what the true job is. And we do have to adapt. And I appreciate you talking about that, because that's something that I think it's kind of one of those black and white things that people just say has to happen this way. You have to go from buddy to boss. Well, yeah, you have to understand your role. We all have to understand our roles, right? So I appreciate you saying that, because I think we go hard with a lot of that kind of stuff. And it's usually the people that aren't even taking the time maybe to read that information and read between the lines. They're just reading the title, and they take it a certain way. And so, yeah, appreciate you bringing that up, and very, very valuable. How about you, Nolan? Anything to close with here? Anything you've been thinking about?
Yeah, just to echo what's just been said, be authentic, be yourself. And that was some really good testing advice that I got. It's hard to do. It's hard to go in, you're going to be, especially if you've never done this before, but be yourself and reflect on what that means well before a process. If being yourself means that you aren't going to like going in there and being yourself because you got some things to work on, do your homework. If you need to work on some characteristics of who you are, do that homework beforehand and go in and be authentic. Just from a fireground standpoint, there's an article out there called Focus on the First. There's obviously a component of the testing process is the ICS, but that I've been asked that before, like, man, how do you handle this? You've got a fire problem, you got a people problem. Oh my God, I need a water supply, I need to ventilate. Focus on the first. That article really helped kind of drill that down. That first hose line, that first search, that first water supply, and take care of those problems in the highest priority. Back to mentors, like we talked about earlier, some of the best advice I got from him was, whether you go into the testing process or more realistically, when you're that first due company to that fire, you're going to have multiple problems, right? What's the biggest problem first? Take care of the people. That could be taking the fire away from the people or taking the people away from the fire. How is that going to look in that moment? Do your homework, whether it's a single family or multifamily, and what's going to be the greater good for the people there. Do we go in and put that fire out, or do we start moving people away from the fire? Water supply, based on the situation, the information you have coming in, are you going to grab your own water supply? Are you going to put it down dry and let a next company pick it up for you, or are you going to go straight to scene? That's changed for me. Over the course of my time as a company officer. Discussion for another time. We could be here all day long on stuff like this, but my mode has changed as far as to lay down a supply or not to lay down a supply, and that ties into the amount of fire that's there and what the incident priorities are in that moment. So I would definitely recommend that article. Focus on the first. It's a little bit of an old one, but for those that would be having test anxiety about how am I going to handle this ICS logically and tactically, that one can definitely help you get the ball rolling as far as the incident priorities.
Yeah, we'll see if we can find it, and we'll add a link to the show notes on that. I can't remember. I think, was that Brian Brush that wrote that
It was, yeah.
years ago? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's still very, very pertinent today, and we just got to simplify these things as much as we can. Wow. Really appreciate all this. You're right, Nolan. We could go on forever and ever on this stuff, but I think it's time to wrap this thing up. I would think it's okay to put your contact information, all you guys, in the show notes. Would you be okay with people reaching out if they had any questions? We'll do that. Also, link to these articles that we've mentioned today, and maybe some other stuff that we find beneficial. Just to end on this, we've talked about it a lot. We've talked about the influence piece a lot. And we've talked about how important this position is. It truly is, in my mind, the most impactful, directly influential position in the fire service. And it's one that we don't take lightly. We're hiring people for the right reasons, with the right values, with the right amount of competence, but the ability to grow as well. You have to understand the influence of this position. We can all look back on the good and the not so good officers we've had in the past. We can remember those in our head. But I think what we probably don't remember is during that time, who was the chief at that time, or who was even the battalion chief at that time. Like, chief officers have a different kind of influence. It's, it's a bigger picture strategy. Like, I may be able to write a policy and have influence, but the company officer truly has the day-to-day influence over people. Company officer has the ability to make or break people's attitudes, to make or break people's careers. And it can't be overstated, like how important that position is. And I think that sometimes our company officers get a little disenfranchised because they think that I don't have the influence over policy. I came in here and I wanted to change the world, and I don't even have the ability to do that because I'm not. You're missing the point. Like, you've got the ability to influence our people and have the greatest direct influence over our people. And the chief might be able to influence a bigger picture culture and strategy. Company officer has the most influence to a person day after day after day. So really appreciate you guys coming on here today. Appreciate the conversation. If you found some value here, please like, share, make comments on the various platforms. Send suggestions to us. You can always email us at opstalk.wfd@gmail.com. Always up for feedback, questions, ideas for future episodes. Thank you all for listening or watching or however you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.